Good evening, everyone. So nice to be here, back in Newcastle. I'm going to read from the kids only tonight, and really looking forward to hearing Joelle read as well. So I became a teacher when I was young. I was 22. I was a couple of years out of university, and I feel like putting on my glasses is like I became a teacher. But I became a teacher because I was looking for some sort of meaning in life after my father had died. He died when I was 21. And the time that he died, I was working, they called it, back then you weren't a personal assistant, you were a secretary. And I worked in a branding company. They did the shareholder reports for like Shell and BP. And my boss, who was the head of branding, I used to have to read his emails. And in his emails, he would say, you could ask my so-called secretary or the world's worst secretary. So it wasn't going well. The white dog. My father was dead. I rode to work each morning through Farringdon, down Charterhouse Street, and saw the same white dog, a terrier, licking a puddle of blood leaked by the morning meat the butchers hauled across their backs to Smithfields. Dead pigs and chickens hung on silver hooks below my office. Upstairs, I typed and filed memos for Shell, BP, shareholder handbooks. But every time I saw that dog, trotting with blood in its beard, its eyes gone cloudy blue, the same thought tap, tap, tapped my head, a spoon against a hard-boiled egg. All afternoon at the photocopier, typing, filing, typing. He was dead. He was dead. Now what should I do? Well, I did my teacher training. And this is the first day on the job, the register. That first September, I climbed the blue stone steps past Shakespeare's doubtful face and an old mosaic of Jamaica and the ruby blot of lips where last year's girl had kissed the schoolhouse brick. Now this year's crop pushed past all clattery chat, their first day back. What's up? Salam. The Fugees blaring from someone's phone, ready or not. And with that old white dog still barking softly in my head, I walked the sugar-papered hall and pushed the classroom door to find a sprawl of teenagers sat waiting, my resitters, all back to do what they'd already failed. I took my seat and called the register. Denise, Tyrone, Alicia, Chantel. Try, try, try again. Why would anyone want to do a thing they'd failed? Like a second driving test or, say, grade 3 recorder. You tried your best, or did you? It was not enough. Try again? You'd rather watch The Price is Right than practice your rendition of The Ugly Duckling or argue with your driving teacher stalling in a box junction. So when you rip the notice open, your keen heart pumping, and find a D or damn an E. You'd rather pull the sheets above your head and flick through Instagram with earphones in, but still you can hear your mum repeat, you'll never get a job without it. No one will have you. Not Tesco's, not Sainsbury's. On my very first day of teaching, I was teaching GCSE English Resit, and these were kids that had it was a real, at that time, 20 years ago, it was a real second chance saloon, the place where I taught. And sometimes, we basically take anyone, essentially. And there was a student in my class on that very first day who had been in a documentary series called Britain's Worst Pupils. Queen Bee. Why did no one warn me about Monique? Kiss curls and diamante nails, Queen Bee who fixed me with a fuck you stare, tipped back her chair come throne, and as if I couldn't see, tip-tapped her phone, and when I said to stash it, she gripped it tight, her eyes unblinking green, her knuckles taut, and when I went to take it, she snatched it from the air, and so began our tug of war. the way that years before I'd fought Lynn Johnson for a soldering iron in physics after days of searing glares, a proper girl fight, face slaps, yanking hair, all hiss and claw, which is really about whether Lynn or me is queen bee of the corridor. So, you know, I had many great experiences in teaching. You know, I was 10 years as a sixth form teacher, and sometimes, you know, lessons just went really well, and you left the room thinking, wow, something really happened there. But I haven't written about those experiences. I've written about the things that have stayed with me because they were difficult. And there's nothing like, you know, having a room of kids, say 20 kids, and 15 of them have professed to not like reading, or what's the last thing you've read, and they all say either of Mice and Men, which is the book they had to read for GCSE English, or they say The Metro, which they'd read a lot on the bus on the way into college. So, you know, reading is a skill, it's hard, and, you know, it takes practice and it takes work. And I was not always the best person to be infusing these kids. Sometimes there'd be moments in teaching, I remember, when I'd be performing the teacher, they'd be performing being the students, but we'd catch each other's eye. And in my head, we were saying, what the fuck are we doing? Can we not stop? The art of teaching, 2. Boredom hangs like a low cloud in the classroom. Each page we read is a step up a mountain in gluey boots. Even the clock face is pained. And yes, I'm sure now, ticking slower. If gloom has a sound, it's the voice of Leroy reading Frankenstein aloud. And if we break to talk, I know my questions are feeble sparks that won't ignite my students' barely beating hearts. There is no Volta here, no turn, just more of the same. The clouds sinking ever lower, the air damper, yet more rain. And the task is unchanging, like spending years chasing a monster you yourself created. Leroy asks, can he stop reading? I say for now he can. So the kids from the sixth form came from all over the world. You know, it was a truly international place. And we had lots of second, third generation young people from the Caribbean, Africa, Bangladesh, Pakistan, also relatively recently arrived kids from Eastern Europe. And in fact, in the minority when I was teaching were white English kids, particularly white English working class kids. But we'd often get going on the debate, you know, what is Britishness? What is Englishness? And it would always, I mean, one of the reasons I wrote the book is something stayed with me so strongly one year that pretty much all the kids in the class had said they didn't feel British, they didn't feel English. These are kids that were born in Hackney, Stoke Newington, Tottenham, had parents from elsewhere, and it got me thinking about that kind of, you know, what is it about this country that makes young people that are born here not want to claim that identity? But this poem is about the only English kid. When the debate got going on Englishness, I'd pity the only English kid. Poor Johnny in his spotless Reeboks and blue Fred Perry. He had a voice from history. Dunno, miss. Yes, miss. No, miss. All treacly Cockney, rag and bone. And while the others claimed Poland, Ghana, Bulgaria, and shook off England like the wrong team shirt, John brewed his tea exclusively on Holloway Road. So when Asif mourned the George Cross banner, swinging freely like a warning from his neighbour's roof, the subway tunnel sprayed in Muslim scum, poor John would sit there quietly, looking guilty for all the awful things he hadn't done. So before the days of risk assessment, are there any teachers here? Anyone that has to do with risk assessment will know what a nightmare that is. But this is like before the time of risk assessment, when we would take 60 students to the theatre. You know, to get these discount tickets, and along we go. And it would be absolutely brilliant taking young people to the theatre because, you know, For many of them, it was the first. Lots of the kids had been to theatre. Many of them had never been to the theatre. I remember saying to a group once, we were going to go and see some 12th Night, and I said, you know, you can get food in the interval, like ice cream and stuff, but it's very expensive, so you might want to bring something from home. And then in the interval, 30 kids like peeled open their rucksacks, 2 litres of bottles of Tango, massive bags of Doritos, Tupperware of fried chicken, and they all just sat there like, yeah, we've been told this is time to eat and drink. But a colleague of mine once said about, it was a big group of kids to see some Shakespeare play or the other, and he said, this is more like bloody dog walking than teaching, and that's the epigraph to this poem, the sixth form theatre trip. You've got more dogs than you can count, big dogs and small. One badass dog in headphones mooching up the aisle, a dog who smuggled in a hot dog. 2 loving dogs back row already smooching. Some dogs are up on haunches, barking, a dog or 2 already dozing, heads in paws, dog sighing and dreaming. The other theatre dogs look down their snouts, a pair of tutting chow-chows, some Sloaney poodles in the box. But when the curtains lift and your dogs are hypnotised, their ears like little hoisted sails, the wag of tails, their shining dog hearts fling wide open. They know these words, these lines, memorised like buried bones. And don't you love your dogs? Well, I didn't have a degree in English literature, so I was often like just one step ahead of some of the students that I was teaching. You know, I didn't know about any of the major literary periods, English, you know, literary history. And so I'm sure that the learned audience here know that the name of the Restoration diarist Samuel Pepys, when it's written, does not look like what it is when it is spoken. But I did not know that at the time that I was, you know, charged to teach the Restoration. I didn't even know what the bloody Restoration was, let alone Samuel Pepys' name. So, Pepys. The posh girls came and took a corner table, all lip gloss and ribbony hair, and each with a fan of starry GCSEs, a summer of youth hostels in Europe behind them, and the future wide open to them, like a rainbow parasol, or so I thought. It was Restoration comedies, and I was teaching, and I was reading the class an essay, and though I'd seen his name, I'd never heard it. Pepys, I said it, Pepys, over and over, until one girl spoke up. Do you mean Pepys? She said. Her voice pulled taut as a noose, as if I were the girl and she the teacher. And what could I have said? I read on. Pepys, Pepys, Pepys. Cool as the trickster, ridiculous as the fool. In truth, I actually, I think I said, no, that's another Restoration diarist. So I moonwalked out the classroom. You know, it's funny because back then I felt so unconfident. You know, now perhaps I would say, yeah, you caught me out. Or if someone says something, ask me a question I don't know, I think I would say, I don't know. Maybe you could find out. Or maybe I'd be Googling it on my phone under my table. Who knows? But one thing I realised over my years of teaching, having made so many missteps in this direction, is that, you know, young people, when they get into stuff, whether it's music or like skateboarding, whatever kind of subcultural expression they're into, the last thing they want is their teacher kind of saying, oh yeah, I know about that, yeah, I'm into that as well. It's kind of excruciating, but I did not know that at the time. All over it. Dwayne's final media project is on graffiti. I'm all over it, he says. So obviously you tell him about Dan, your older brother, years back spraying one train then another with a jangling sack of cans he'd robbed from home base and wire cutters from the shed. You reminisce, the police, the social worker, sat while Danny tagged the bathroom mirror, then tiptoed down the stairs and out the door. Mum crying in the kitchen, how much more? She hid his puma suede to keep him in. He threw a red brick through our window, running barefoot down the street. You tell Dwayne this, but he's backing out the room. Yeah, nice one, miss. I'll read some poems from the middle section of the book. The middle's really about my education in all its formal and informal manifestations. And I went to a really traditional secondary school, where we spent a lot of time reading the canon, and then I wasn't allowed into the sixth form. You can ask me afterwards why. It involved a sticky bun. That's what I'm going to say for now. And I was sent off to FE college, and there I met the most radical teachers of English, both called John, and the book is dedicated to my old English A-level teacher, John Toolan, who died far too young. And the first book he gave to us was Enter Saki Shangays for coloured girls who've considered suicide. Like, such a radical book, for the time. This is back in 1995. It blew my mind. It awoke in me allegiances that I didn't know I had, because I hadn't quite realised at that point that I was really interested in my father's life and my father's story. And it galvanised my love for literature. So I'll give you the whole title of Enter Shangi's book, which is also the title of this poem, For Coloured Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. Our vows were flat as the dead fish that floated in Dagenham docks, but still John made us recite these lines meant for black women who said, I have poems, big thighs, little tits, which made us blush as our estuary tongues went tripping over cuz and enough, and the slashes the poet scattered over her page. And the whole bloody thing might well have been staged on another planet, compared to Essex and my pals, whose mums served up school dinners, whose dads worked nights at Ford's. We could just make out the half-rubbed words of last year's kids, discourse, nationhood, and soon I'd borrowed in my own new terms, hegemony, resistance, sisterhood. Another poem for John, Pink Hummingbird. The postcard he sent to you in that long, wet summer had on one side a pale pink hummingbird, and overleaf his notes on your essay on Faulkner. In his usual turquoise ink, the words you imagined written in sunlight on the bed of his book stuffed flat, and each weighed with care like a love letter, though it was you that wanted him. All summer you waited for September to be back again in the tattered classroom, the tables pushed together, and him at the top, like a doting father or a bridegroom, or like God, if God wore Dr. Martens shoes and a silver sleeper in one ear. Not the God you didn't believe in, but one who believed in you. I'll just read a couple more. I'm going to read one that I don't normally read because it's a bit sexual. Some of you in here, if you're into soul music, R&B, you might have heard, like, there's a soul singer, Shauna Scoffrey, who's like, doing all right for himself. And he was at college with me. He was on the BTEC Performing Arts when I was doing my A-levels. And I said that John Toolan was like God, but Shauna Scoffrey, when I was 16, was God. And the epigraph to the poem is from Luther Vandross, so amazing. It's so amazing to be loved. I'd follow you to the moon and the skies above. So amazing. But God was Shauna Scoffrey, age 20, on the college stage singing So Amazing, and looking down, I still believe, at me. His voice was like a shirt unbuttoning, hot palms on skin. And what is prayer but praise and quiet entreaty? Below my breath, I said a prayer for him, for Sean, whose singing raised a gale in me, but whose beautiful shaved head was full of a formal God, and the Pentecostals who told him to deny the flesh, deny glittering desires of teenage girls. I knew nothing about men or sex or love, but at night, one palm between my thighs, Sean sailed me to the moon and skies above. Okay, I'll give you one more slightly lusty one, and then I'll read one more to close. Sonnet for Darren. I should say before I read this, I've now got an 8-year-old son, and this is about when he's like quite a lot younger. It's not really about him, but he pops into it. Sonnet for Darren. Men don't look at me like this anymore, the way this tall young man is looking at me. I feel my heart swing open like a door. The traffic lights flash red. Rory, just 3, rolls backwards and forwards on his tricycle. The man's still looking, yes, at me. His smile like heaven. I remember this. Trouble, desire, bliss. But God, it's been a while. And here he is, so close I can smell his skin. White t-shirt gleaming, his afro flamed like sunbeams around his face, which is lovely, like a dream I used to have. And now his mouth is moving, saying, "Miss, it's me, Darren, remember?" We chat, lights change, Rory and I cross over. And the funny thing about that is that when I was a kid, my mum was a primary school teacher, and we would bump into, grown men and women in the street that would always say, "Oh, miss, it's me, remember?" And then to have that happen to me, because the kids that I taught, the ones that I taught the furthest ago in time are now in their mid-30s, so it's a sobering thought. I'll finish with the very last poem in the book, which is about, the whole book's about learning, about teaching. It's about how we keep on learning. I hope the book expresses my gratitude to all my teachers and my commitment, belief in lifelong learning, that learning doesn't stop when we leave education, but hopefully can continue for us all in some way. And the poem is dedicated to Mimi Carvati, who has mentored me for many, many years, but it's also kind of about yoga. Kathy, Carla. The body is something like a poem, I guess, as I watch my yoga teacher, Kathy, on the back row mat of Carla's yoga class. Kathy can do King Pigeon, the crow, full monkey, yet here she is in a simple forward bend, while Carla lays her palms around her core to push her deeper. Can every pose be deepened, I wonder? Can what's been mastered be mastered more? A poem is something like a body, I guess, when I'm holding somebody else's poem in this sun-filled room they've called a masterclass. But I'm not a master, just a pair of palms which push or pull or loosen someone's lines. I still need kind and guiding hands on mine. Thank you for listening, everyone.